Good evening, everybody. I'll go ahead and call the meeting of the Water and Sewer Advisory Committee to order. Unfortunately, we're missing our chair and our vice chair this evening. They were unable to make it. One of them had a last-minute cancellation. So what I'll need is a motion for somebody to run the meeting and a second, and then a vote on that. So if you're willing, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion for Fernando takes over because he's so good at it.
All right, I have a motion.
Second.
I have a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, Mr. Fernando, the meeting is yours tonight.
Thank you, sir. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I call this March 13th, 2025 Water and Sewer Advisory Committee meeting to order. Mr. Hart, do we have a quorum?
Yes, we do.
All right, thank you. Has everyone had a chance to review the agenda items?
Yes.
All right, are there any discussions? Hearing none, I'll accept the motion to adopt the agenda as written.
I'll make a motion we accept the agenda as written.
Thank you, sir. Second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Agenda adopted. Has everyone had a chance to review December's meeting's minutes?
Yes.
Are there any omissions or corrections? Hearing none, I'll accept the motion to accept the minutes as written.
Okay, I'll make a motion we accept the minutes as written.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Minutes approved. Again, welcome everyone to this month's meeting, and we'll turn it over to Mr. Hanson.
Good evening, everybody. I appreciate everybody being here this evening. Tonight, we only have one topic for discussion. So this might be a shorter meeting than normal, but tonight what we're asking for at the end of the meeting is if you're willing to make a recommendation on the capital improvement plan. So this year, we started the capital improvement plan a lot earlier than we have in previous years. We actually began planning for this capital improvement plan in September, and I think our first presentation, actually in August, and our first presentation to you was in October, and then we discussed it again either in November or December at our meeting. We've presented to you the draft capital improvement plan. And tonight, what we'd like to do is just kind of run through as a reminder of what the capital improvement plan is, and then any changes that have happened, and then ask you to consider approval. And of course, that would be adopted with the budget. So with that, the capital improvement plan is really a plan that we look to tie our capital projects to council goals and initiatives. And the idea behind that is that we want to focus on those council goals and initiatives and lay out a 10-year plan that carry us in that direction. You know, you're the Water and Sewer Advisory Committee, so the part that you focus on is the water and sewer projects. And we come up with those projects in a number of different ways. We look at how our maintenance and operations are running, where we're having excessive leaks or breaks or maintenance problems with lift stations. We also look at growth pressure, so demand for new service, the capacity in our system, and then we try to pull those all together into a capital improvement plan that both supports the longevity of our existing system and growth. And then we look at how we pay for it and fund it, which is where our model and everything else comes in. So as a quick reminder, the capital improvement plan is a 10-year plan. This year we're talking about FY26 to FY35. We update that plan annually, and look at the plan annually, but as you know, we don't change all of the projects annually. The idea is we're following master plans and models and other things, and we're trying to plan. So it's while it is somewhat reactive, we try to keep that plan and our information as stable as possible. And then the purpose, though, is to prioritize projects that we need to invest in, and then we use that to set our rates, essentially, is what we end up doing. And in that rate structure, not only do we cover capital projects, we also cover operations and maintenance. So, and then lastly, for funding, it's used to not only the rates, but the system development fees as well. So in order for a capital project to be eligible to be in the capital improvement plan, it needs to basically be a long-term capital project. So you're talking a project that generally between planning, design, and construction takes longer than 12 months. At this point, unfortunately, almost everything feels like it takes 12 months with lead times and everything else, but that's one of our general criteria. And then the cost needs to exceed $50,000. And then we're looking at a useful life of greater than 5 years. I can tell you that most of the projects we program in our capital plan are infrastructure-related projects. So while you have some components of a project that may be 5 years or close to 5 years, almost all of our projects are geared more toward a 30 to 50-year useful life. You know, if you're talking a pump station, you have pump station components that have to be updated or replaced within the life of that station. But again, that station is planned and designed to be a 50-year station, and we have some to prove that that's the useful life. So, and then when we're talking about our different projects, we focus on, again, that new construction, replacement of existing infrastructure. Is it an improvement, or is it growth related, or is it a rehabilitation project? What we don't include in capital plan is things like computers or fleet or equipment, those pumps that I mentioned, generators, those kind of things are not in the capital plan. Although we do have a plan for those, it's called the equipment replacement plan. So some of those items, while they can be capitalized, they're really not construction. So our capital plan really focuses on construction-related projects. And once again, while we have a 10-year plan, only the year coming up for funding is the year that is funded as part of the budget and adopted as part of the budget. So each project that's identified in the plan, if it's a rollover project, it already has money programmed in this year's budget. And depending on the project, it may add a little bit of money next year. Or if it's a new project, there's no funding in this year, but all of or some of the funding would begin next year as the budget is adopted. So it helps us set that budget. And the capital plan is a key component to the budget, which is why we start so early in the year, and we've kind of moved that over time so that it can be included. And as you know, we've talked about our rate model. So we've programmed all of the projects that are in the draft CIP into our rate model, and in keeping with what this board has recommended over the years and what council has kind of adopted as their policy or procedure, I guess I should say procedure over the years, is that 2.25% annual increase. And I'll revisit that in just a moment. In the draft CIP, this is the full CIP, we have 123 projects over the 10-year period for a total of $154 million. Projects get completed and drop out, or projects, priorities change and we move away from a project or replace a project. In some cases, we've combined projects. So over time, the number may differ slightly, I've seen and the value may differ slightly. What I've seen in the past is, I think the highest I remember is around 165 million in one of our CIPs, and the lowest is around 150 million in our CIP. So,
That's a 10-year window.
but that's a 10-year window.
Okay.
And I think the other thing important to recognize is it's programmed in today's dollars.
Right.
So we don't, if a project would cost $5 million today, 10 years from now, we in our estimate, we're not building in, escalation. Now, what I will say is our model builds in escalation based off industry standard factors, but we don't build it into the document. So when we plug it into the model, it's basically plugged in current dollars. And then the model handles any escalation. Of course, the other thing with that is projecting for 10 years, we may say if we have a pump station, we're expecting, a million gallon a day pump station, or in the case of Western Region, a 4 million gallon a day pump station. But as we get closer, we refine those numbers, and it could be smaller or larger, which can also affect cost of that project. So scope has a large impact. And we typically start refining that scope when we get 1 to 2 years out. We really haven't, we're pulling information off of master plans and other things for the initial scope. But as we do planning for a project, or we start preliminary design and we look at alternatives analysis, which we do for every project, that alternatives analysis may affect the overall scope of the project. So in this year's CIP, we have, and this is related to water and sewer projects, we have a total of 52 projects, and you can see how they're broken out here. And in FY26, we have 19. And I apologize, I don't remember the exact number. I don't know if Roy remembers or not. But I want to say all but about 4 or 5 of those are existing rollover projects. Which means that we've either started planning, design, or construction on the majority of these projects, which again constitutes that we want to keep a fundamentally sound CIP. It shouldn't fluctuate every year. That's not to say that you don't have a high priority project come into play, which we did this year, but that means that, generally speaking, you're trying to follow your master plans, especially for those growth-related projects. So from the draft that we originally presented to you, we have several changes. We have one project where we did increase the funding on the project, and I'll get into that one a little more in detail. We have 2 projects where we adjusted the expenditure timeline. We didn't really adjust the funding for the project, just when the funds would be expended. And I'll go into that in a little more detail too. And then we had 14 projects where we basically refined the description based on either updated information about the scope, or in some cases we found some grammatical things that we needed to correct. I didn't attach those in the agenda that you received tonight because they were minor in detail. They really didn't impact the CIP or the scope of those projects majorly. They were really, in most cases, it was just updating where we currently were or what we had information for. So on the first project, the project where we did increase funding, the project is related to a DOT improvement project. It's the U5789, which is the intersection at Jacksonville Parkway and Gateway Drive. And we have some both water and sewer conflicts there. They gave us a preliminary cost estimate probably 4 or 5 years ago. And they just did the design and updated the cost estimates, and that did go up pretty significantly. The other thing that they did or that we requested they do, is look at Gateway North, which is a city street, city-maintained street. It's the one right near Starbucks. And they are going to resurface a portion of that street for us, since they're already going to be there doing the work. The first really down to that first driveway is in pretty bad shape. So I think they're going to go a little bit further than that, but they're going to resurface the driveway as part. Now, that's not water and sewer funding. That would come from our POW bill fund, but that was some of the increase. So you can see here that the total project is $288 now, and it was somewhere around $90,000 originally. And again, and the other thing I'll point out, you notice the funding is in FY26, but the expenditure is in FY27. I recognize that looks slightly odd, but the reason for that is we will do this by agreement. So when we enter into agreement with DOT, which we expect to do in FY26, we have to secure the funding for the improvements that they'll make, and we expect that they'll make those improvements in FY27. Although it is DOT, so sometimes they'll make the improvements in 27 and not send us a bill till later.
So does DOT bid that project out and they manage it? So
They do all of it.
So all you're doing is funding it?
That's correct.
What are they doing?
So they're adjusting some alignment, and they may be adding some lanes. It's been a while since I've looked at that project, but it is a U project. So it's a statewide funded project.
Okay.
So, and they are moving forward with that project. And then on the Court Street Infrastructure and Streetscape project, we updated that description, and I don't remember the exact change there. We adjusted the timeline. Originally, we had, I think we had all of the funding in FY28, and it's probably one of those where it got plugged in and it should have been moved out. Sorry, not the funding, the expenditures. All of the expenditures should have moved out. But what this tells us is we plan to do the engineering for Court Street in FY27 and then design in 28 and 29. The section of Court Street that we're really looking at is that portion near from Cheney kind of to where the one-way street is now. That's the kind of the section we're talking about. We already have a project in works for this section. It doesn't show up because we plan to have most of that money encumbered and possibly expended. But that Court Street project, which is not water and does not have any water and sewer funds, would adjust that one way. It would actually take out that one-way direction right in front of the courthouse, open up that for two-way traffic, adjust the intersection at Newbridge Street, and then remove the brick portion that is between Biagio's and I think that's Walton's attorney's office. It would remove that section of brick. So this portion connects that with what we're doing up at, what we already completed up at the Center for Public Safety. But there are water and sewer alignments that have to be done there. So that's why you see water and sewer funding.
Okay.
And then the last, what I would call major change material change that we made to the CIP, or their draft CIP, is the expenditure timeline for Commons Pump Station. We moved that out some. We didn't change the overall funding. But I think this one's important to talk about because right now we're seeing a lot of pressure, development pressure, in the Ramsey Road, Drummer Kellum area. We have an existing pump station called Country View that pumps to the Commons pump station. In order for them to continue developing in that area, Country View lift station has to be upgraded, and commons would have to be upgraded. The country view is going to be the responsibility of the developer. But the large portion of the commons would be the city's responsibility because it is our existing infrastructure. On top of that, it does have some age on it, so there are some things that we need to do to it. The challenge here is we don't know yet if we'll move forward exactly with this project as it is planned. And the reason for that is we have just begun negotiations with a company to do a new water model, a new sewer model, and a new water and sewer master plan. And that sewer model will be instrumental in determining whether this is the best place to bring that sewer. So if this is not the best place to bring that sewer, what you may see, and this is one of those where I talked about the stability of the CIP. This may be one of those where you see us come back with a request to change this project and move that money to something else. But that something else will be determined by the model and the new master plan. As well as we move forward with that model and master plan, it will help us in resetting and establishing our CIP next year.
How long does it take them to?
Well, we've asked for the sewer portion to be done by at least August.
Okay.
The good thing is we do have a water model that has been fairly recently updated. The sewer model has not been updated since I think 2017, 13, 17.
Yeah, I think 16, wasn't it?
I know it was somewhere.
Yeah, in that range, right?
Yeah, in that range. Time flies when you're having fun, by the way. So, but either way, it's 10 years old, and it has not been updated. But we do have a model, so they'll be able to import it into the new software, and they'll be able to add the new extensions that have been made during that time frame, and then remodel. And then, of course, a big part of what takes so long of that is calibration.
Yeah.
So I think the computer work portion of it is not as difficult because we have a base to work from, and we have good GIS information. But what will be the biggest challenge is probably it will be the calibration. So when they calibrate it, what they'll do is they'll run a scenario in the model, and we'll go look at run times of lift stations and flow meters that we have in our system and see if the model and the system react the same under the same conditions.
Gotcha.
But part of what we want them to look at with the master plan and the model is whether we can take, how we could possibly take some of the growth in this area and move it toward the Western Regional system instead of taking it through all of our existing system to main pump station. So I kind of overshared with this project, and you'll see that one of the things that we did update is put in there about the model information and that model may impact this project. So that's if that happens, that would come back before you and it would go to City Council for consideration.
Okay.
And then the ones that we made updates to, this just kind of is a summary of the projects where we kind of just changed project description or added some language to the project justification. And this is one of the things that we've recognized as a staff where we could get better at. If you look at the three that we just discussed, you have pretty good descriptions of that project. But if you start looking at some of the projects that are, like, for example, FY32, that's a long way out. So as we get closer, we're trying to update some of those descriptions or justifications to be more accurate and have more detailed information. So that's what you see here. So with that, here's our timeline. We had that initial discussion in October. We did run our rate model after our discussion. what we found is that even with what happened with the Western Regional Pump Station where we had to request additional funding, we were able to continue with our projects in our CIP within that 2.25% increase, base increase. And that is it was actually run in our old model and the new model that was just recently presented to City Council. I think that was presented in maybe January, so that they were able to see that. So we presented the draft CIP to City Council for their review, and they had a comment period. We received a few comments. Those were incorporated in. There weren't any significant project changes or anything like that, just primarily a few questions. I think we were asked to look at one project that was not a water and sewer project that we made adjustments to. So tonight, we're kind of here to wrap up the water and sewer portion, ask for your recommendation of the draft that you saw with these changes so that it can go to City Council. And the idea is it will go to City Council in April as the final draft. It won't be voted on until it's voted on in the April, May as part of the budget, where that's what will be included in for funding, but it will go to City Council in April. The other thing that I did want to share is I'm part of a listserv of other utility providers across the state, water and sewer providers across the state. And somebody recently sent a request across that saying it's that time of year again. You know, what are people willing to plan or share what they're planning on rate increases for the upcoming year? And of course I shared ours because we have what our planned increase is and what our model shows that it supports. But I can tell you that other than one, there was one other entity that shared that at this point they're not planning a rate increase, but it's highly dependent upon their capital improvement plan, which is yet to be approved. Everybody else was well above us. Most of the people were in double digits, most of the people that shared. So, and there was some that there was one that was at, I think there was one at 8%, which was the next closest to our 2.25, and one that was at 10.5. And then I think there was one or two that was close to 15. So there is a challenge with increase, cost of living and goods and services, and challenges in getting chemicals are a real challenge in water and sewer treatment. They're just a challenge to get, they're a challenge to order. And in most cases, when we submit an order, we only get a partial fulfillment. It comes it'll come as 2 installments. And we're right back ordering as soon as we get it.
Wow.
So that's big. And we saw I think it was last year, we saw 60% increase in chemicals. So it is a significant challenge that not just us, but everybody is dealing with. So with that, our request to you would be to recommend approval of the water and sewer portion of the CIP to City Council for inclusion in the budget.
Can I ask one quick question?
Absolutely.
It'll be quick, I promise. When you were talking about the rates and all, we stay within our 2.25 rate and we're good to go. I know it's gone up. How close are we to reaching that? That is almost it's so quite as high.
So what we've been able to do to date is adjust projects when necessary. So one of the things that Roy and I sit down with the finance director to do is when we run the model, there's several things that we can actually play with. what project should we debt fund? What project should we cash fund? And then what projects could we move that would help? And the way we determine that is we run the model in two different ways. We run it as a just-in-time, which means that you only end up with a rate increase when you actually need it. But no matter what it is, that's what it tells you, that rate increase. So it may say, 4% this year, but 12% 3 years from now, or something like that. So what we've been able to do is, by doing that and then running our 2.25, when we run the 2.25, what we do is we watch the graphs, and if you dip below one of the indicators, which tells you that your increase is not high enough to keep you in the safe range, then it kind of flags that indicator. And debt coverage is one of those indicators. And then the other thing we do is we leave the last year blank. So we'll hard key 2.25% for the rate increase for every year. But if you leave the last year blank, and it tells you need a 32% increase or a 25% increase, your 2.25 isn't covering it.
Exactly.
Or by the time you get there, you're out.
Yeah.
So what we've been able to do is, where we have a project programmed, if you have expenditures, and that's what it works off is expenditures. If you have expenditures, like in some cases, you'll end up with $10 million of expenditures in 1 year and $2 million the next year. Well, if you can figure out how to adjust some of that $10 million a year and move it a year or two, it can make a significant difference in the model. So when we adjust timelines, one of the things we have to do is go back and relook at the model and make sure we didn't throw the model off in one of the years. And it does each year does have a little bit of funding in it that kind of gives you a contingency.
Buffer.
Yeah, it's not a huge number, but so if you have a year where it says you would need 3% instead of 2%, sometimes you can look at that contingency number and adjust it slightly. I don't know that it gives you a whole percent, but you can kind of, there's a little bit of a play there too. So that helps.
Probably what David's looking at or looking for is, just like you're talking about, chemical costs are up 60%.
Yep.
Construction costs on most projects are probably double what was projected 4 years ago or whatever. So, at some point.
It catches up.
Yeah.
Exactly.
At some point, some of those projects are going to be pushed down the line, or some additional funding is going to have to come to the table, whether it's grants or increase in rates or what have you. So.
And I'll go back and say that the $23 million that we got, $20 million from Senator Lazar, and then $3.2 million or whatever it was, $2.3 million in ARPA funds. That's probably what's kind of saved that 2.2. And I think there was 1 year we actually didn't do the 2.2 because it was a hard year or something. So, but even with that, it's still, we've still been in really good financial shape.
Yeah.
And the whole purpose of that, we've said it several times in meetings, the reason it's worked out so well, so we don't have to face the 12, 16%. That's when people really it hits people.
Yeah.
Doing, 10 years now we've been doing this at 2 point something?
I think it's been 10 years.
It's been close to 10 years. I know Randy.
Mr. Thomas
he was around back then.
Yeah, and he was here when we did the double-digit increases 2 years. I think we did it 2 years in a row, or we did it 1 year, and then we got a break, and then we did it the next year, and that one was like, I think the first one was 12, and the second one was like 25. I was here for that. It was not pleasant. I fielded some of those phone calls.
But I'm just saying, I think it's important for people, especially if they're on GTM watching, to understand how lucky we are that we only do 2.5.
We are.
2.5. That other counties, I know for sure, are getting hit right now with a high budget. So kudos to you guys is what I'm really trying to say.
Well, thank you.
We're making it work.
There's some challenges there when it comes to materials and chemicals and construction
Exactly.
costs. We're trying to hedge some of that, but it's a challenge. But I will, one of the things I'll add is that we built our 8 million gallon a day water plant with 8 wells and 100,000 feet of pipe. In 2000, we started in 2000, I did that project, we started in 2008, 9, maybe 9, and I think we finalized all of it, had it online by 2012. To the tune of about $47 or $48 million, $47.5 million. The base just did a plant that was 6 million gallons, no wells, no pipe, $126 million or something. So there's some real challenges out there.
And they're not going away.
No.
See, like what Terry was saying, meetings like this and the public watching, learning where the money goes and how it's spent and how we're trying to save by the staff's effort, it's invaluable. So if anybody ever has any questions on why am I paying so much, listen in. This is what you gotta do.
Well, we'll answer it.
Inflation's inflation, but you're gonna minimize the painful aspect as long as you're doing it, the procedures you go through. It's good. You need a recommendation?
If the board's willing.
Then I'll make a motion that we recommend your approval of the water and sewer portion of the CIP to the city council.
There's some recommendation on the board. Do we have a second?
I second the recommendation.
All right, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries.
Appreciate
Put
it.
a caveat for the EN 27001. That's kind of,
Is that, I gotcha.
and also, we've been planning for all this growth, but I've been looking at 18,600 bills for 14 years.
Yeah.
Any expectations of
Well,
bus 19 or something?
The infrastructure is pretty much in for the vineyards,
Okay.
right there on
Government.
Gum Branch. And then, yes, no, sides. And then, I don't know whether anything will come of it, but we have been working through reviews and agreement with the Patriot Park project on Piney Green Road. And then Harvest Meadows, you always have those, it's funny, Harvest Meadows was 192 lots, and it came online fairly quickly, but it didn't look like there was a huge spike. It just seems like that growth is just kind of slow and steady, and when you have, people come or go and turn off accounts or whatever, I don't know, it just seems to, and what I will say is a large portion of our growth, while you don't see a bunch of meters, is commercial. So, 14 years ago, none of the public shopping center was there.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, I'm not even sure that Zaxby's and some of those were there.
Yeah.
So you don't see, it's not like you're seeing thousands of new homes come online. You're exactly right. But some of that growth comes in the form of maybe not meter count not being as high, but demand being larger.
4-inch service or whatever.
Yes. And we've had multiple, which we would think I would add to meter count, but like the Crestfield and Springfield apartments, on Blue Creek Road, there's 80 or so.
80 and 72.
Yeah, there you go. 150 units there. And those are all individually metered. So, between the 150 there and the 192 that I know about, and you would think that count would grow faster. I don't know.
Yeah, good point.
Maybe we should have one of our financial rehashes. We haven't.
We can do
had one
that.
here.
We haven't had one in a while.
Okay.
And we're coming up on budget. That's a great idea. For open discussion, I really don't have much. What I will say is we had a sewer inspection with the state today, and that went very well. No major concerns. I'm sure they'll find something for us to adjust or do differently. We typically get that advice, but no notices of violations or area of concerns were noted. And we do a pretty good job of tracking our work. TJ is required to camera 10% of the sewer mains every year, and he's required to clear so much right-of-way every year. And he documents all of that, so all of our documentation and everything was in alignment, showing that we had met those requirements. And then the other thing is his staff is continuing to work through the lead service line inspections. So again, for people in the community, as you're talking to them, if they ask you why we dug 2 holes in their yard and then filled them back in, that's why. We're trying to identify what the service lines are. Anytime we're in the stage now where we're doing incremental notifications and reporting to our citizens. So if we come across the galvanized service line, we report it almost as soon as we find it. So, it's not like we have any mass mailings go out or anything like that anymore, where it's kind of once we find, we educate and we inform our citizens. So we're continuing to work through that. So that's really all of the open discussion that I have.
All right. Do we have anybody else? Any open discussions? We're good with that. All right then. Our next, in closing, our next meeting will be April 10th, 2025, 5:30, same place. And saying that, if there are no other business to be conducted, I'll accept the motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All right, meeting adjourned.